Welcome back to We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling, where I give you the tools and skills you need to love better so you can live better. Most relationships don't end over one big blow up. They die slowly, one unresolved fight at a time, one difficult conversation you avoid, one apology you never make. Eventually, the foundation begins to crumble, not because you stop loving each other, but because those little injuries, they were never healed. You keep having the same argument. You think it's about control or respect or how they load the dishwasher. But what if the reason you keep having the same fight isn't because your partner refuses to change? What if it's not about communication at all? What if it has everything to do with how your nervous system responds to theirs and the dance that you guys have been locked into without even realizing it? My guest today is Julie Manano, a licensed marriage and family therapist, best-selling author of Secure Love, and host of the Secure Love podcast. Julie's work centers on attachment theory, helping partners understand how their earliest emotional wiring shapes the way they love, the way they fight, and the way they reconnect. Julie's going to help us see the root to our endless fights, because once you see it, you can stop fighting each other and start fighting for the relationship. Julie Manano, welcome to the show. You say that most fights aren't really about what they seem. What are they usually about? And how can someone tell when they're stuck in that deeper cycle?
Mm-hmm. Well, almost 100% of the time, if a couple is fighting, that means that underneath the surface is emotional disconnection, unmet attachment needs, and a lack of emotional safety, right? Like meaning that I'm not 100% sure that my needs matter to you. I'm not 100% sure that you're willing to, hear what I have to say and kind of validate my feelings around this. And it's happening just ultimately if you're fighting, right? If you're fighting, that means we've moved from whatever the surface level topic is into now we're trying to manage two different things at once, which is our attachment security / emotional safety and whatever the topic is at hand.
And is that something that we can tell we're falling into when we're having the same fight over and over, or any fight?
The same fight over and over is a really good indication that you're going into cycles, because why is that topic not being resolved, right? Why it's not being resolved is because most likely you're going into fights or what I call negative cycles every time you try to talk about it. And so every time you go into a negative cycle, the issue doesn't get resolved. It either gets like pushed under the rug or whatever. And it's going to, if it's a real issue, it's going to keep coming back up over and over until it gets resolution. But then if you're, talking about a totally new topic or even a topic that in the past hasn't caused a fight, both partners really need to be able to tap in and be kind of in touch with their body so they can feel when they're triggered, or they can recognize when their partner is triggered, meaning their nervous system is kind of activated. It's gone into like a protective place or maybe a disengaged place. And so when people can start to have more familiarity with what their body feels like when they're triggered, it's a good indication, okay, I'm going into that zone where I might start, instead of trying to really connect and lean into my partner and lean into this topic, I'm going into like trying to regulate my feelings in ways that might not actually get us anywhere.
And when you say tune into our body, are you talking physiologically, like what is physically happening to my body in the moment? Recognizing tension or an escalated heart rate?
Yes. For some people, it can be a pressure in their head. For some people, it's a tightening in their neck or a dropped feeling in their stomach or a sick feeling or a sinking feeling or a numb feeling. It's really, those fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It all kind of circles back to that. It really can show up differently for different people. For anxious attached partners, it's going to be more of like a overwhelming felt sense where they're going to know they're going to tighten up and they're going to feel kind of panicky or whatever. For those with avoidant attachment, it could be very difficult for them to even learn how to access it. And they might experience more of like a just need to like escape or just kind of disengage or go numb.
And so what do we need to do in those moments when we do plug into our bodies? We can feel ourselves escalating. so that we are not playing into this dynamic,
Mhm.
or should we you said those are two conflicting needs. The subject that we're talking about, me with my wife, the
Mhm.
subject that we're talking about, like who's going to take out the garbage, which we never fight about. We fight about
Yeah.
dumber things than that, if you can
Yeah.
imagine.
Nothing's dumb,
um
but okay.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Um so that is one need, the actual triggering content that we're discussing versus the attachment need of
Mhm.
wanting to feel like my needs matter. What should I do at that point?
Well, if you are in this cycle, you know your body's triggered, they're triggered, then that has to be addressed first because the odds are high that if that doesn't get addressed, you're not going to get anywhere with the surface topic. Yes, we need to circle back to the surface topic. It matters. We all need to know who's going to take the trash out. We all need to know, where the kids are going to go to school, where we're going to go to dinner, how we manage in-laws. I mean, there's a number of things. But if we're trying to do that when we're in these cycles, it's just going to block it. And it's then what's going to happen is it's going to make that subject more tense going forward because now we're afraid of it. And it's going to just make emotional safety worse and possibly build resentment. So we got to first recognize, okay, we're going into this cycle. And then we need to figure out, okay, that means we're unsafe. So
Mm-hmm.
step one, we need to get some safety, right? So first level of safety, or there's two ways to get safety. Or two areas of safety, I should say. One is I need to be safe in my own body, or more safe at least. Sometimes it's not perfect. It's just more regulated, right? You're
Uh-huh.
not at a 7, you're at a 4. I can deal
Right.
with
Or
a 4.
less
Yeah.
dysregulated.
Yes. And in most difficult topics, you can expect to have some level of angst because they're difficult, right? It's just we don't
Mm-hmm.
want it to go into that zone of now we're really showing up in this awful way. And then you need to now create safety between each other, right? And so the first thing is like, some couples can just immediately co-regulate. They're strong enough as individuals and they're strong enough with each other that they can immediately go, okay, hold on. We're already kind of not hearing each other. Let's reset, or let's just sit and hold each other for 5 minutes before we try to go into this conversation. Some couples aren't at that place. And so what they need to do is as individuals step back and go, okay, something's coming up for me. What's going on? Let me just kind of take a moment with my nervous system, figure out, what feelings are coming up? What am I needing in this place to get myself back into a safer spot? Do I need some time? And sometimes it's not just a safer spot, it's an engaged spot, an emotionally engaged. So the avoidant partner is typically needing to somehow engage with themselves emotionally so that they can now engage with their partner emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then the anxious partner is needing to kind of soften their nervous system response. So they're not just like coming in hot.
Yeah. So are you talking about taking a time? They sound simple, but to know where
No, they're
you
not.
are on
Yeah.
a dysregulation scale, 0 to 10, 0, you're not dysregulated at all. You're neutral. 10 is the most
Hmm.
jacked up you can imagine being. To know where you are within that is even an advanced skill. It's a skill for sure.
Definitely.
And then once you recognize that you're creeping up to a 5, 6, whatever, um, what are we doing at that
Yeah.
point? Should we know ahead of time what to do when that moment happens?
I think it's very important to have strategies, right? And it's tricky because different situations call for different strategies and different people and different topics call for different strategies. So it's really about trial and error, getting to know yourself, what works for me. I mean, some people do need to take a break. Some people need to take a pause. Some people just need to, come together and physically co-regulate. What it is really experimenting with each other and figuring out what works, and then using the time after to process what happened. Like when you are settled, right? Just be able to, look, here's what happened. We started to talk about money. We went to that bad spot. Let's just kind of figure out what we can do better next time. So I do think that if you can ask the question, are we going to harm each other emotionally or ourselves and our own sense of dignity emotionally by going forward with this? It's far better to pause it. And it does
Right.
need to be circled back to, right? But it's far better to pause it than it is to go forward and create a bigger mess, basically. Now, with that said, relationships aren't always so black and white. And sometimes couples can go forward and find their way through that, right? I'm sure you can relate to that, where you've just kept going, and then eventually somehow you get to a good place with each other. So there's always, different options. I think the real answer is awareness, just awareness, and using the time after these episodes to gain awareness and clarity around what happened. And sometimes you need, resources and help being able to make sense of it after the fact.
Yeah. So when we're becoming dysregulated, essentially what is happening is we're no longer talking about the presenting subject, the presenting fight. What is happening is that there's a deeper need in one or both of us that's not being met. And we can't stay on the surface subject without addressing the deeper subject first, because we'll never really resolve the surface subject unless we're both feeling safe and connected. Is that what you mean?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And even less, connected's great. That's icing on the cake, but at least safe, at
Yeah.
least.
So often I work with couples. I call them I use this as a term of endearment because I consider myself one as well. I don't mean any disrespect, but I work with neurotic New Yorkers, neurotic people from big cities throughout the country and throughout the world who are high achieving, and their partners are too. And they
Yeah.
come home at the end of the day and there's not a lot of gas left in their tank. And they're trying to have two or three at worst neutral hours with their partners.
Sure.
And ideally some connection there.
Yes.
And the minute a subject begins to go into a direction where they're feeling dysregulated, they're feeling emotionally escalated, both of them immediately begin to go off the rails.
Yes.
But it's not a one-off evening for them. This is their life. And if they don't power through it, their concern is that the next day they're going to wake up at the crack of dawn, they're going to have to go to work, and then then they're going to get back into the cycle of the day. So the people that I work with tend to want to power through it in the evening when it's happening. What would you say to a couple like that?
Well, I mean, I always say, look, if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. So if they are having success with somehow getting through it, then great, at least they got through it. And then we want to go back and go, okay, why did it take us so long? Like, why did the negative part of this cycle last for so long before we got to a place where actually we were able to start being safe with each other? Because that's what happens is at some point, if they do work through it, they probably found a way to get out of the cycle. And so now we just need to be clear about what shifted. Where did you start to feel safe? Well, it was at the moment when you told me you were sad instead of yelling at me, or you said this thing that really made me realize, hey, maybe my needs do matter, or you said this thing that caused me to feel more empathy and open to you. And so now we're going to learn from that and go, okay, why did that work? Well, because, when I'm getting the message that you're open to me, I start going, oh, maybe I'm going to be heard here. And then my nervous system starts opening and I start being more more capable of hearing you because I'm feeling more empathic and open. And then we want to use that knowledge and awareness to keep backing it up. All right, next time, let's see if we can get there faster. Maybe not perfect, but 10% faster. And then, maybe one day we don't have to go there at all. Wouldn't that be nice if we just didn't have to go there at all? I love that line, because if you can lead with that the next day and say, hey, we did such a great job. Look, we were able to find each other and get safe with each other and get through it. Wouldn't it be nice if we could figure out a way to back that up a bit? What partner says no to that, right?
No one. And to be clear, I'm offering that as an example because in the experience of my clients, that kind of like powering through it works like 1 out of every 5 times.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a slot machine. All you
Yeah.
need, we all know, well, those of us in behavioral sciences know that inconsistent reinforcement, which is to say not getting the ideal result every single time, but getting it sometimes in an unpredictable way,
Yes.
is actually
Keeps
more
you going.
reinforcing. It keeps us more likely to engage in the same pattern in the
Yeah.
hope that it's going to happen in the future. But 1 out of every 5 times is not a great odd. It could, those
No.
aren't great
Yeah.
odds. So that is what I'm speaking to here. And
So we got to get clear about what's different between the 4 times when it doesn't work and the one time that it does work. That's where the work is like what happens that's different in that one time that we need to start doing more of, or what happens in the 4 times that's not working that we need to start doing less of.
got it. I think
Yeah.
that's sage advice. Would you suggest that people, and the thing is that we live busy lives. People, when it does work, people tend to like then go on to an enjoyable activity, go to bed, wake up the next day. By the time they're in a session with me, I'm lucky if they can remember what
Yeah.
worked. I'm
Yeah.
lucky if so would you recommend that people like do some journaling?
Yes. I mean, I think that it's just like anything else. If you want to be physically healthy, you've got to take action. You've got to move with intention. You've got to, do exercise or eat right or whatever it is for you. And it does take time and effort. And the same is true with relationships. I mean, especially considering, as you well know, the many, many people in the world who grew up in environments where they really didn't learn how to do conflict and how to do, all these feelings and decisions that need to be made that are probably exponentially more now than ever. And so it requires effort to go back and kind of do this work and figure out what's working, what's not working. It's not something that just happens for the
Right.
vast majority. So yes, journaling, having a conversation with your partner, just devoting time, at least once a week to communicating about your goals and what's working, what's not working, what you want to do more of.
Right. Maybe at least jotting down or voice memoing to yourself the tails of the bell curve, like when it really worked and when it absolutely didn't.
Yes, that'd be
might be
great.
too
Yeah.
big an ask to just expect people to reflect after every bicker or disagreement, because especially for people who are caught up in this cycle, that would be a daily exercise, and that's a big ask. Although to your point, what you said about working out, it's a big ask to expect people to work out 3 to 5 times a week. But if you want to be as healthy as you can be, that's the ask.
It's really true. It's hard because so many people want to say, well, relationships should just be easy. And I mean, that would be nice if they were, but if you didn't grow up in a home where they were easy, the odds are that you're going to have similar challenges, now. But I think too, once we get out of the weeds and out of the trash and out of the money and out of the in-laws and we get into those attachment needs, it's a much simpler conversation. Because it can be as simple as, I just felt heard. I just need to feel validated. I just need my emotions validated. And it actually, believe it or not, takes less time to be intentional and kind of work on figuring it out and how we can work better together and having that be successful than it does to spend the whole night fighting every day of the week.
Literally. And I've used that exact terminology with clients in the past. I've used it in my own relationship.
Yeah.
I've said, Steph, we can just have a conversation about how we're interacting now.
Yes.
Or we can keep powering through, hoping
Totally.
to hit the 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to take longer to do that than to do the former. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
So
and I like that.
Nice. If
Yes.
we only spent 15 minutes doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of, and then be disconnected the whole night because neither of our needs were met.
Exactly.
What's something that surprises the couples that you work with when they finally see the root of their dynamic?
Okay. So I would say for couples who aren't familiar with this negative cycle concept, that there's this kind of pattern taking place, it can be very eye-opening for them to have it mapped out and have them actually see that underneath every single different topic that they're trying to address, there is a very, very consistent pattern that pretty much looks the same from topic to topic. And it's very relieving because once you see it that way, you realize we don't have to sit here and spend all this time picking through our different perspectives about money and arguing with each other about whose way is right and whose way is wrong. And if we can just actually get down in there, and probably the biggest surprise of all is that when we get that stuff stabilized, the symptoms start to go away on their own. And they come to me and you, and they're like, we need skills to work through, to talk about money. We need to be able to compromise or whatever. And they start to realize that we're not even really trying to talk about money in a new way. We're actually just getting these needs met and focusing on that. And all of a sudden, when we talk about money, we're just not fighting. It's just kind of the symptoms start to dissipate on their own.
So basically, when you get them to the point where we are in this conversation where there's clarity around the fact that what we're fighting about is really more about safety, connection in the relationship and attachment within the relationship to each other, and less about the superficial thing that we're disagreeing about, then it becomes simpler for them to identify a strategy to do it differently.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're repeating these interactions over and over again in the therapy, experientially, they're getting all of this good bonding experience and they're kind of integrating those skills in the room. And it becomes less of an effort outside of the room. And another thing I've noticed, and you may have too, is that when people start actually getting connection and getting their attachment needs met, it feels so good that they stop being so rigid about their positions around a lot of things anyway. Like all of a sudden, I don't need those shoes so much. And we don't need to argue. Or all of a sudden, I'm not going to stress out if my partner, buys that boat or whatever it is. And when people are feeling unsafe and disconnected, they're more likely to double down. And when they're feeling safe, they're more likely to become more flexible. Not all the time. I mean, some situations are really important and deal breakers, but even in that, the more flexible people start to become because they start to just feel safer in life, the easier they're going to be able to collaborate with their partner and everybody else.
I hear from clients repeatedly that it's not even so much, and it's interesting because this has changed in recent years. It used to be we're fighting over who's going to clean the litter box or bring out the garbage or whatever the mundane household chore is. Now what I'm hearing from people is it's the tone, it's the way we're disagreeing, it's the way we're responding, it's the defensiveness, it's the he or she didn't let me finish my thought. And there's a lot of rigidity around I should be in a relationship where I'm able, and I don't, it's interesting. They make a good point. I should be spoken to in a respectful tone. And yet to communicate that in the moment can be so tricky to your partner, because how do you, and this is a literal question, how do you communicate that without criticizing?
So first of all, what's happening is in that kind of a situation is people are more familiar with these concepts, right? And self-help and tone and knowing my emotions are going to be validated. And that's wonderful information. But sometimes when people are kind of new to this, that information starts to become part of negative cycles. So now they're arguing over the relationship help or the self-help or the Instagram post they read or the book that they read. So now they're saying, well, you're not doing these skills. And now they're getting in a negative cycle about how they're communicating. The way out of that is two things. One is sometimes we just have to give each other grace, right? Sometimes we have to let the tone go and deal with it later. Not kind of micromanage every little thing that's going wrong, hope that we're
not be the tone police.
Exactly. But that also does matter. And so it could, sometimes if we let things go, we'll notice that they self-monitor or whatever. Sometimes there's value in not, like you said, not being the tone police. But the second thing, this is probably the most important thing couples can do, honestly, is take turns. Like just agree going into it, we're going to take turns. I'm going to be the one, I'll start. I'm going to lean into you. I'm just going to hear what you have to say. I'm going to validate what you have to say. I'm going to reflect what you're saying to me. And I'm really going to take that in and let you know that I'm understanding you. And then we're going to sit with that, right? We're just going to hold that and we're not going to move past that. And hours later or whatever, when that's really I don't always think it's a great idea to switch right then, because then it becomes, I'm just biding my time, before I can have my words. And so we just really hold space for one partner. And then later we come back and switch. And
Yeah.
that's when you bring up the tone, right? Is like, look, I know we've got this, issue of which, where we're going to move or whatever to talk about. And we've got to get there. And clearly that's important to you. But what I'm really needing to say is that when we start going into these conversations and your tone gets antsy, like I start, my nervous system starts to get out of whack and it doesn't feel good for me. And I don't want to leave you feeling unheard. But if I'm not feeling like, like the tone is going to be a little more collaborative or whatever, or gentle, then I won't be able to hear, and that's not going to work either. And then it's that partner's responsibility now to lean into that. And it does take some practice with that. And, it's work, right? But it's ultimately you're working yourself out of a job if you're being consistent with, really grounding your communication into structure.
I love that. You're working your way out of a job, because who wants to be the relationship coach in their relationship?
No. And you don't want to have to forever pause. You want it to start to become natural and second nature. But as you know, you got to practice anything. Your golf swing, you have to do it really slow and deliberately for a long time before it starts to flow. And that's how relationships work too.
It's so interesting. What a great metaphor. I just have started learning to play a musical instrument. And my teacher has said to me 2 or 3 times, because I have ADHD, the H is a capital H for me. Hyperactivity and impulse control is not my greatest strength. And I've never seen it worse as an adult than I do in this learning in our lessons.
Oh, sure.
Like he gets half a sentence out of his mouth and I'm banging on the drums trying to replicate what he's saying. And he said to me, it's finally sinking in. He's only said it about 3 times, but still 3 times when you're my age feels like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Yeah. He said, Darcy, you are going to learn 100 times faster if you practice 10 times slower.
Oh, absolutely.
Follow the theory. You have to slow it down. You have to break it down. And then you can begin to scale it up and speed it up. But if you just come out of the stable, rearing to go like a stallion, which is kind of how I approach it, because I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic
you're
about
playing
it.
The drums. How can you slow down?
It's really primal. I never expected something to scratch. I didn't know it was an itch I needed to scratch. But I am slowing down and I'm absolutely seeing that. And so what I hear you saying is that the same goes for relationship skills. We have to slow it down. We cannot just go
absolutely.
speed. We can't expect cruise control to get us from where we are to where we want to be. We have to be super mindful.
Absolutely. I always say to couples at the very beginning, the slower we go, the faster we go.
That's so good. That's what I felt.
The slower we go in here, the faster you're going to change and shift.
That is literally what I was picking up on from you, which is why I drew that analogy. I'm glad I got that right. You write a lot about how one partner's attachment style interacts with the other's attachment style. How does that play out between someone with an anxious attachment style and an avoidant attachment style?
Yeah. So what it's going to look like is there's going to be some sort of emotional imbalance that they probably came to the table with to begin with. And then they're going to create more emotional imbalance between the two of them. That's going to create an emotional void at some point, right? They come together, maybe things are rolling along. It's the honeymoon phase. Everybody feels seen and heard. And then the conflict comes, right? And then they go into a negative cycle and they can't get through it. And then more cycles build up. And now all of a sudden we've got this tension and this disconnection. And so the anxious partner begins to subconsciously take the role of closing the distance, but very intensely, right? And the avoidant partner now takes the role of keeping things from getting worse. Don't rock the boat. So the anxious partner is trying to address everything and get everything resolved. The avoidant partner is just trying to not fight and make
Yeah.
things worse by fighting. And so it's all out of balance. So the more the avoidant partner is pulling away in an attempt to keep things stable, that's their way of protecting the relationship. The more the anxious partner gets angsty, and then the more they want to come in hot, that's their way of protecting the relationship. And just neither of those roles are working. So we've got to get that balanced out to where they're both taking responsibility for filling the gap, and they're both taking the responsibility for doing so in a way that isn't destructing them.
Right. It's interesting. What I sometimes see, because there's always anomalies, there's always outliers to every category that we identify. And when we think of an avoidant attachment style, I think of exactly what you're describing, someone who is really trying to stay out of conflict, stay in peace, and disengage in an attempt to keep the connection going, but the
Yes.
anxious person often can't sit with the distress that they're experiencing.
Yes.
Their way of regulating is through communicating about it, but the way that they're communicating about it is not serving the couple. What I sometimes see is as the avoidant attachment styled partner becomes aware of this role that they play in the relationship, they will begin to bring concerns to the anxious partner and not pace those concerns. And so, they're trying to break the cycle of being avoidant, but whenever you try to break a habit, you tend to overcorrect at first.
Overcorrect.
And you bring too much to the other partner. What would you say to someone who is experiencing that?
Well, so we need to look at how that's showing up in a cycle, in a moment, right? And we need to figure out, all right, in this moment, what's going on with you? Here you are, you've got these feelings coming up. You're new to these feelings and you're recognizing I need to do something here besides pull back. And, you're learning how to do that. You're learning how to put words to that. And you also probably have some kind of pent-up resentment or frustration that maybe needs to be dealt with. That might start to come out more. It's starting to come alive. And so we need to figure out what in this moment when all that's welled up, what can we help you do differently? That is healthy assertion. You're moving toward healthy assertion instead of kind of aggressive assertion or, kind of aggressive assertion or whatever. And then we need to go over there and work with the anxious partner who's getting this new stuff. And we need to help them say, reinforce this showing up. This is great, right? Look, I'm so happy. You're not pulling away. I know you're not getting it perfectly right, but thank you. And here's what would feel better for me. And I see that as a very normal part of the process and actually very positive, because if they can stay on that trajectory and just learn to balance it out, as you well know, then it will balance at some point if they keep working at it. It's just, trying on new things. And, it's like, I always compare it to like when people start to set boundaries, right? They have no boundaries with anybody.
Right.
And then they start setting boundaries and it's like boundaries, like they're just throwing out all these boundaries all over the place and everyone's getting annoyed with them. And then they need to kind of learn to back it up and find the sweet spot there.
That was the alternative example I was going to throw your way. You have the anxious person who tends not to set enough boundaries because they do regulate through communicating about how they're feeling. And so they tend to be more open to talking about conflict or negative feelings than their partner does. And then when they begin to realize how they're co-creating this dynamic with their partner, which is to say that like, all we ever do is talk about like how dysregulated we both feel, then they
Yeah.
start setting boundaries, and it's just like wall after wall after
Yeah.
wall, and the poor partner feels like there's no room for them to
There's
breathe
no
or to
winning.
express
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I don't just talk about mental health, I live it. And in my 20s, I built a boutique private practice that reflects the kind of therapy I always needed. It's called Alternatives Counseling, and we are now accepting new clients. If you've ever listened to this podcast and thought, I wish I had someone to walk me through this in real life, that is exactly what we do. We work with individuals and couples, especially high achievers, who are killing it in their careers and want that same success in their personal lives. We help you build deeper, healthier connections without losing yourself in the process. This is evidence-based therapy delivered by licensed therapists who are the best of the best. Change is hard. Doing it alone is harder. Come do the work with us at alternativescounseling.com. You talk about how people confuse calm with being secure. So I'm curious, how are those two things different? And what does a secure relationship actually look and feel like, particularly during conflict?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you can know about a person by their nonverbals, right? We know that, but there's also a lot we don't know about people's nonverbals, right? I mean, you can see someone who just looks so calm and steady on the outside that I like to say like a duck on a pond. I mean, you see this beautiful duck just kind of gracefully flowing, but underneath their little legs are paddling 90 miles an hour. Yeah, and so that can happen a lot. Sometimes even with anxious partners, but sometimes with those with avoidant attachment is they look so calm on the outside because they're used to they learned so early on to turn down the heat, keep it down, keep it under control. And they got really good at that, not because they wanted to, but because somehow that's how they learned to survive toxic emotional environments. And inside, their body's just on fire with anxiety, but they don't have contact with it. That's why you're going to see more health problems with those, especially like blood pressure and heart issues with avoidant attachment, because all that energy is just kind of swimming around in there. At least with anxious attachment, they're expelling the energy, right? That doesn't mean it's really working for them. But anyway, so, couples can look calm all the time, but they're seething underneath that calm, or they're just disengaged under that calm. So,
and to the partner, to the anxious partner, I so often, well, I have experienced this as somebody who has struggled with an anxious presentation. And I say presentation not because I was secure, but I came out of childhood disorganized, more leaning towards the anxious end of the spectrum.
Yep.
So I have experienced this myself and my clients. We tend to attract what we are. So I got lots of anxious attached clients. Those are the ones I tend to attract.
I love it. I'm sure you work incredibly well with all of them too.
I definitely, I endeavor to. And so what they will often report to me is that when they're in conflict with their client who presents as that duck, calmly in the lake, in the river, in the water, to them, they perceive that calm as their partner doesn't give a shit about them.
Yes.
Their partner does not care. They're checked out. They couldn't care less. So that calm presentation does not even communicate to the partner necessarily, especially if you have a partner who has an anxious attachment style or presentation. It's not going to feel to them like you're calm. It's going to feel to them like you have your shit so together that you don't give a fuck about them.
Yeah. You're cold. It's cold, not calm. Yeah.
Right. And so how does the anxious person communicate that to their partner?
Well, first I need for that partner who's calm on the surface, I need to get down and figure out what's going on below that and get them communicating more about, the first step is going to be, this is the function of my calm. this is why my body goes to calm. This is what I'm trying to do here. You see this person who's just retreating and being cold and doesn't care. But what's really going on is I'm feeling so overwhelmed inside, and I don't want to disconnect from you, and I don't want to make things worse, and I don't know what to do. And so the calm is my way of just somehow like turning down the heat and trying not to make things worse, right? And that's because I love you and not
Yeah.
because I don't. It's just, I don't know what else to do. And so when they can start communicating more, and then we go into deeper layers of vulnerability and maybe get into some shame, the deeper and deeper we go. And then they start communicating that. And then their anxious partner starts to understand more. And then in that, what's that avoidant partner doing? Not shutting down anymore. Now they're engaging. So now we're getting the very opposite behavior that we're looking for. And so now they start to recognize, okay, staying engaged is actually way more successful. And now I'm learning how to do it, and I'm learning some words, and I'm learning some what's going on with me. That's actually more successful than the success I'm trying to achieve with quote unquote calm, right?
Right. The poker face it's not communicating a connection to the partner.
Totally. Yeah. And then I've got to get that anxious partner, responding to that and reinforcing that. But I also have to get them to see their role in their partner's quote unquote calm, because they have a role in that too. So I need to now get them communicating in a different way so their partner is more likely to stay engaged with them. And then I've got to get the avoidant partner communicating in a way that their partner is less likely to perceive them as just exactly.
Right. Because that's what happens. They dial themselves up when their partner looks to be robotic. That's what you rarely hear an anxiously attached person report that their partner presents as calm. The partner to them presents as checked out.
Yes.
Doesn't really care, completely disengaged when there's so much physiological activation happening. I have often fantasized, this is how sad my fantasies are, Julie. I have often fantasized that we get a wearable for each partner, and the wearable is monitoring our heart rate and our blood pressure, but it's communicating it to the partner, because I think if we could see the biofeedback of what's happening with each partner, I just think organically, none of us want to mess our partners up. We don't want to cause our partners to have a stroke, a heart attack, or to be tachycardic. Nobody wants that.
No.
Or the vast majority of people would really, I think, would respond well to that. And if somebody is out there, an app developer, I called it so you don't get to claim it. You want to collaborate with me? I'm here for it. No, not you. No. Some listener, not you, Julie. Okay. If you want to collaborate on it, I'm here for it. But I actually think that would be so helpful, because it would bypass the need to be in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that is our thinking brain.
Right.
That's why biofeedback is so effective in changing behavior and changing neural networks, changing our brain structure, because when our bodies see what's happening, it naturally regulates. And if we could see what disconnect was doing to our partners, or what bickering was doing to our partners, I really think we would all give each other a lot more grace.
Probably. Yeah. It would really, I think, you're dead on. It would open us up to empathy. You see a broken leg, right? You don't see emotional distress. And what you're describing is a lovely way to actually see the metaphorical broken leg of the heart.
Yeah. The X-ray.
The broken heart. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love it.
Let's say someone is listening right now thinking, this is my relationship, but I don't think my partner is willing to view our issues through a therapeutic lens, and certainly not through attachment theory. What's one thing they can do to begin to shift that dynamic?
Well, I always say two things. One is just go ahead and start working on your side, right? There's value in working on your side that is more than just how it's going to impact the relationship. There's a lot of self-work there that you can feel better in your own skin by working on your side. And yes, when you're working on your side, you will have to maybe tolerate feelings of disappointment if your partner's not joining you. But that's good for you to learn to tolerate feelings of disappointment, because that's part of being human, and we need to work through those things. Ideally, though, I mean, it's not going to work if your partner doesn't come on board to do their part. One partner cannot, on their own, create a healthy relationship, but they can certainly get the ball rolling. By doing their part, they're now going to be creating a lot more emotional safety and space. And a lot of times when people feel safe because their partner is doing some new things, they do start to self-reflect. And they start to maybe have to take a little more accountability because they can't keep blaming their partner if their partner is, really working to show up as their best self. And then the second thing I would say is, like, instead of going into it from the place of you don't want to work on the relationship because you're this or you're that or your dad or your mom or your whatever, I say lean into it. Try to kind of lean in and go, well, help me understand why this lens doesn't feel right for you. Like, what doesn't work for you about this? I mean, that is the work, is really trying to understand, helping them put words to that, and then being like, well, all right, so, I do make sense of it through this attachment lens. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see my role. And how do you make sense of it, though? Like, how do you make sense of our problems? Because the way we make sense of our problems is ultimately going to be the way we try to address them, try to address fixing them.
Right.
And so I'm curious, like, how do you make sense of it? Because maybe we can also try some of your, strategies, and it probably won't have a good answer for that. But
No, they definitely will not. I can imagine, like, well, you need to change and you need to do this.
Well, yeah. And so then that, I always have this bag of responses that you and I have because we're therapists, but the response is, yeah, I'm willing to do that. Right. I'm willing to make some changes. And, I'm going to ask you to join me in that. And you give me an idea of what changes that you would like to see me make. And I'd like to give you an idea of what changes I'd like to see you make, and let's take some turns with that. Because the number one thing is, wouldn't it be nice if we don't have to keep going into these negative cycles, whatever you want to call them? I don't care what we call them. If you want to call them, whatever, like tree therapy or I'm just like coming up with stupid words, but let's call it whatever you want. We still need to see how this pattern's playing out.
I like your first answer, which is to say, work on your side of the street.
Yeah.
If you're the one who's listening to this, I don't work with couples. I work with individuals.
I see.
Which is interesting, right? But I affect change in relationships.
Absolutely.
Because all it takes is one person to be a hero.
Yes, absolutely.
And so if you
shifting.
if you can reflect on your role, if you can begin to clean up your side of the street and minimize your contribution to the problems, and listen, if you're listening to this, I promise you're contributing to it. And that's not the bad news. That's the great news. Because
absolutely,
if you're part of the problem, you can be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
And
it's empowering.
It really is. It's not about blaming. It's about figuring out that it's about identifying your contribution to the problems. And once you remove those, then therapists often describe these cycles of bickering as a power struggle between two partners. That they're in a tug of war, a metaphoric tug of war. Well, you can't play tug of war if you're the only one holding the rope.
Absolutely.
You need a partner to be pulling on the other end. Otherwise, there's nothing to fight against. So I love your first answer.
Great. Yeah.
Just not to say that I didn't like your other answers. It's just to say that the first one really resonated with me because I think it's the thing that you have the most power around.
Yeah.
And it can be so demoralizing to approach a partner and say, how do you view our problems? And then be on the receiving end of hearing why you're the fucked up one in the relationship.
It's hard. It's brutal. It's brutal. And I think, the second part of the answer is sort of the subcategory of the first part. The first part is work on your side. And the second part is you have this disagreement about the relationship problem. This is an opportunity to model validation, understanding, curiosity around something that we disagree about. And if you can do your work and lean into that with your partner and help them feel heard, you're now modeling the very behavior that you want back from them. And there is a very good chance with that approach that they're going to soften to, yeah, it's that doubling down thing. They're less likely to double down and more likely to be like, maybe there's something, to this.
And I just want to concretize the terms that we're using
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who might not understand. When we're talking about validating and reflective listening, it just means you shut up while your partner's talking, and every few sentences, you give them back what you heard them say, ideally in a neutral or positive tone, at worst neutral, ideally positive. And it goes like this. So what I hear you saying, Julie, is that in order for you and I to collaborate better as professionals, it's important for me to reflect on XYZ. Do I have that right? And then your partner has an opportunity to say yay or nay. And the way we validate is after we're done reflectively listening, like we're paraphrasing back what's being told to us. And while you're doing that, you're literally seeing your partner de-escalate before your eyes. Now, the cherry on the sundae is to tell them why the way they feel makes sense to you. It makes sense to me that you would feel that way, Julie, because, and you want to name the emotion. Hopefully the partner has identified an emotion that they're feeling. It makes sense to me that you would be frustrated because I'm always turning towards you to be the solve in this relationship. And I can imagine that leaves you very frustrated. That is validating. You don't have to agree, by the way, to validate. No. You're just showing the ability to step into the other person's shoes and see it from their perspective. And if you haven't used that twofold, that two-step tool, you're missing a power tool.
Absolutely. I love it. You just, laid that out perfectly. You're ready for your book.
Thanks. Thanks.
I mean, you can expand upon that, right? And just okay, here's the bird's eye view, which is what you just gave us, and then you can put a lot of micro skills in there along the way, and it's great.
Yeah.
We all need that.
If only the books did the thing. They don't do the thing. I would love to put us out of business. Like there are so many self-help books, and a lot of some of them are really, really spot on. This is not new information is my point. But also
this is why I do, because I have a book, and this is why I do a podcast, because I don't know if you know this, but I take a real couple through 20 sessions, and throughout the sessions, I'm giving commentary to tie it all back in to what I'm teaching in the book, hoping, because there's this huge gap, as you're saying, between self-help and actually, processing and therapy. So I'm hoping to kind of integrate all of that in to help people get a felt experience of what the information is in the book to kind of bridge that gap.
I knew you walked couples in real time through couples therapy. I did not realize you give them 20 sessions. That is so amazing. And talk about throwing, some skin in the game. You're literally putting your theories to the test.
Absolutely.
On your podcast. That's phenomenal. I love that. And I am a listener of your podcast. So
okay. Great. So
I love the work that you do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. I'm so happy that you're getting something from that.
I'm so glad to hear that. And it's just it's a different way of teaching. And that's why I do the podcast, because it's a different way of teaching.
And yes, absolutely. We got to get in there however we can. And you have a gift.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
These days, it's pretty easy to take a quiz and figure out what your attachment style is. But that doesn't always mean you know how to heal. I myself have been in couples counseling with therapists who are specifically trained and certified in attachment theory, but they never offered up a tool or a skill to help Steph and me. We mostly talked about theory without any practical application, which is to say, to move closer to a secure attachment style, Darcy, do this, don't do that. And let's practice this for homework for the next week. So I'm wondering, I know it's a big ask, and I know we've been at it for a minute here, or like 55 minutes. Can you give me one tool for each of the insecure attachment styles to help our listeners begin to move towards a secure attachment style?
Yes, I think I'm going to give one tool that applies to everybody that is stuck in insecure attachment, which is self-abandonment. That's 100% the root of the problem. Self-abandoning one's own emotions, right? It all starts there, meaning you're not diving under the surface in yourself, under your anxiety, under your anger, under your shutdown, under your numb. You're not getting in there. That's why it's so hard to do this work alone, because therapists are trained to help you get there, right? And so what happens is these places get left alone, these unresolved griefs, these shames, these unmet needs, they get left alone. And what do we do when they're left alone? We just keep acting them out. Some people act them out with anxious attachment presentation. Some people act them out with avoidant attachment presentation or disorganized. And until you're able to really dive into yourself, find those places, listen to them, figure out what they're needing for healing, both from yourself and from your partner, you'll never be able to resolve it, and you'll continue to behave in all these ways that are trying to regulate all of those things that really truly need help.
So when you say self-abandoning, dumb it down for me.
Yes. Okay. It means that, when I shut down in an argument, underneath that shutdown is a lot of unexpressed anger or resentment. And under that is a lot of, feelings of sadness, feelings of loneliness, maybe some feelings of like powerless or helplessness, or, underneath that, some shame. How did I get in this position? What about me is so flawed that I'm finding myself, stuck in this place to begin with? And then unmet attachment needs. I don't feel heard by my partner. I don't feel valued by my partner. All of that stuff is getting ignored when you're in numb, right? And so that's the abandonment, is abandoning all of these human parts of yourself, leaving them alone. And so we got to figure out how to get in there and start showing up for that. What is showing up? Feeling it somatically, putting words to it, trying to understand it better, and then ultimately listening to what it's needing. We don't want it to stay that way. I mean, we're always going to feel pain as humans, but we need to start healing those places. We can't heal them if they're being abandoned and acted out on and, band-aided with all these behaviors that probably just make them worse. So we got to get in there and start figuring out, okay, what is my anger telling me? This anger has something important to say. Something needs to change. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's them, but I really need to explore this. Or what is my sadness needing? What is all this unresolved grief needing? Maybe it needs words. It needs comfort. It needs understanding. It needs some shifts in the environment I'm living in, so it doesn't have to keep going back to sad to begin with. I'm feeling lonely. I feel powerless. I need to have a little more power in the relationship. And if I can't get in the relationship, how can I get it elsewhere? I'm needing some connection. And so we start being able to figure out what is needed in those places. And when we're figuring out what's needed, we're not just leaving them in the basement, in a room in a basement where they're just getting ignored.
That makes sense to me from an avoidant perspective. I'm curious, what does it look like from an anxiously attached place? Self-abandonment, what does that look like?
Same. It's just that the way this anxious attached person is trying to deal with the problem, the deeper stuff, just looks different. It's the same stuff. It's the same shame. It's the same loneliness. It's the same fear. It's the same, unresolved grief from past wounds. It's the same frustrations and angers and resentments that aren't getting addressed, or are getting addressed in ways that aren't really addressing them. It's just making them worse. It's just that they have different ways of regulating it. Someone with an anxious attachment, their way of regulating it is fight, close the distance, protest, get the other person to hear. If I can just make these change, if I can bring attention to the problem and get them to change, then all of this stuff is going to be okay. But it's not.
To me, that doesn't feel like self-abandonment. That's probably because that's where I hearken from. The
Yeah.
attachment end of the I mean, the anxious end of the spectrum. To me, that I can certainly understand how expressing one's needs in a fucked up way
Yeah.
would undermine the ability of your partner to meet you halfway. But if you're somebody who is expressing yourself reasonably well,
Hmm.
maybe not textbook perfectly. How is that self-abandoning? Are you expressing the wrong things? What do you mean?
No, I mean, if you're, you can not self-abandon. You can show up for your emotions and really be there and learn how to have a beautiful relationship with yourself and express yourself in a beautiful way. And if sadly and unfortunately you don't have a partner that's able to join you in that and help you with that and be responsive and do their part of being a good partner, that just because you're doing your own self-work doesn't mean they're going to be able to show up for you. I mean, unfortunately, there's no guarantee. So now what's your work? How are you going to take care of yourself? If you don't have a partner, are you going to stay stuck and protest indefinitely and continue to try to squeeze water from a rock, or
Mm.
are you going to eventually recognize I don't want to have to stay in this place of protest. I don't want to have to keep having the expectation unmet that this partner is going to be able to show up for me. What is my plan B for me? Right?
Wow. So you're talking
Yeah.
about exiting a relationship at that
It
point
could
because
be. It
to
could
stay
be.
in it is
Yeah.
self-abandoning.
Well, okay, it's not that simple. Some people do stay in relationships and not self-abandon with a partner who can't show up for them. Maybe they learn to recognize the ways their partner does show up for them and they lower their expectations, lower their standards. Some people just kind of they need to stay in the same house for the kids or whatever, financial. I mean, people have so many different reasons that they might physically
Stay
stay.
together.
Yeah, and they might have to just detach or and sometimes, when that person does do the self-work and stops fighting, sometimes that does kind of turn the heat down and create shifts on the other partner's part. Sometimes they do need to. Sometimes the showing up for self is saying, I'm scared of being alone. I'm scared of losing this, but I also recognize it's not working for me. And I'm not, no matter how much work I do, no matter how much how great I'm doing on my end of the street and how much perfectly I'm showing up, they're not ready. They're not there. They can't meet me where I
Mm.
want to be. And what do I need to do? Do I need to leave? Do I need to go, you know, um, hopefully find a relationship one day that with someone who can show up for me, who is ready to take that leap?
And then for disorganized, somebody who lands on the disorganized end of the spectrum, which is the hybrid between anxious and
Hmm.
avoidant, and that's the style I left childhood with,
Hmm.
the most complicated of them all to heal.
Hmm.
And you generally land more on one end of the spectrum than the other. You're a hybrid, but you either present more avoidant or more anxiously attached.
Hmm.
What does self-abandoning look like for that person?
Same. It looks like dealing with the fear. You got to look at the behavior, right? So we're always saying, okay, well, what's the problem behavior? The behavior symptom is going to is going to lead us into the feelings, right? So someone with a disorganized attachment, maybe their behavior is being very impulsive, getting really reactive. Their partner just kind of has a flash of an angry look that might not even be an angry look, and bam, their alarm system is in overdrive. They grew up in a home where any sign of dad not being okay is going to lead to dangerous stuff. Right,
Yep.
bam, they're off, right? They're lost. They're it's all coming up. So unfortunately their job is bigger because their pain is bigger, right?
Mm.
It's just their pain is bigger and it floods them quicker and so, their job is still though to recognize with this dysregulation my body goes in, what is that dysregulation trying to help? The dysregulation isn't random. It's somehow their body trying to stay safe and they're confused and chaotic and they don't know what to do. But we still need to get down in there and figure out what's the fear. Name the fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? The fear is something really bad's going to happen. What's the impact of
Mm-hmm.
that fear? Well, the impact of that fear is I'm going to get harmed and I'm going to end up in disconnection and you're going to be mad at me and I'm going to be scared and alone and you're going to leave me. And I mean, these huge, catastrophized fears that can come up. And then what's that going to be like? Well, that will be terrible. Well, what's terrible?
Mm-hmm.
Terrible's sad and alone and regret and depressed and shame and feel bad about myself. And okay, let's get some words to all of that stuff. Let's look at the shame. What is that shame needing? What is this fear needing? Right. And so then we just start to assemble it and piece together like what all of this stuff is needing. So these behavioral symptoms don't have to keep going to that place. And so we're actually getting really healed. And we got to do that self work to heal. And then we want to invite our partner in to help us with that. And we need to invite our partner in to work on these negative cycles so we don't keep getting hurt. So it's
Right.
like we're healing self, we're healing the relationship. And then all this healing is taking place. And it starts with getting to the stuff to begin with, which is the opposite of self-abandoning. It's showing up for self.
That is so chock full of information. I'm rarely quiet for that length of time, but that was great. That was
Yeah, well,
really,
thank
really
you.
great. I appreciate how you articulated all of that. It sounds to me like what your advice to listeners is to just question yourself. Start with the presenting
Mhm.
symptom.
Yes,
Either
start
you,
there.
either your partners, or start with the partner, because we can always identify what the partner is doing wrong. The partner
The
does this,
trigger. That's the
and
trigger.
right,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then that makes me feel how, and that is a problem. Why? What is my greatest
Yes.
fear around that? We're kind of doing deductive reasoning.
Totally.
We're drilling down and
Yes.
we're just asking why and so what and what does that mean?
Yes.
Not so what in a dismissive way, but so what is, and what do you imagine the ramification of that to
Yes.
be, until you don't have any more answers. And that's your core wound.
Basically, yeah. I mean, it's gonna, if you look at my notes for every session I, have, it's you're gonna see that scaffolding, right? You're gonna see me just going through it. It's not. It doesn't come off as robotic, and it would be hard to recognize that I'm doing that when you hear me work because I'm kind of weaving in and out. But that is it. I'm looking for all of those layers, and first I'm going to go to function of the yelling. What's the function? Why are you yelling? What is that yelling trying to do? Then I'm going to get to the
Mm-hmm.
protective emotion, the anger. Then I'm going to get to, whatever meaning is happening that that's actually first. But really the
Like the
place
meaning
that
that the person attaches to the trigger.
exactly.
So
What's
so
the
my
meaning
partner
of the look
shuts
on their
down,
face?
right?
Yeah.
And I immediately go to childhood experience. That's how my rageful father looked right before an explosion.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And
I
then
don't
we're
know
going
how
to
to read the
go,
room.
yeah. The first thing after that for people who are new to this is go into the fear, dive into the fear. The fear will get you there.
That is
Yeah.
that's bold, The
Yeah.
fear will get you there. Where's the safety belt and the helmet and the parachute? Because that's what I think most people feel like they need.
Yeah. That it, sometimes titrating yourself, sometimes just naming, okay, there's some fear there. I'm just going to feel some of it. I'm not going to dive too deep in it right now because maybe I don't have the capacity, but it's just start, like dipping your toe in, pulling it
Mm-hmm.
out, and then just starting to realize, first of all, I think this is better done with, um, some sort of support system, a friend you
circling my
can
brain
call.
what circling my brain
Yeah,
was, can we really do this alone? Should we engage a professional
I think.
in this journey?
Well, the sad reality is that some people don't have that access, and some people it's like, well, you're either going to do it alone or with some sort of support system, calling a friend, and when you're done, and just being like, hey, I'm doing this work. It's so sad and hard, and just getting something. Or just having that stuff be stuck in you indefinitely. I don't really believe that we're meant to do this alone. I think most people can find some sort of resource. I really don't, but I really believe too that spiritual help can be very useful um, with some of this.
Connection to a higher source.
Exactly. For those who are open to that.
Yeah.
That can, in the worst case scenario, but usually people can find some sort of support group or resource out there for other people who are kind of going through the same thing. And what I don't want to see is people being stuck, kind of controlled by their emotions their whole life because they don't know how to feel them and assemble them and make sense of them and figure out what they need and listen to them. That's the worst case scenario, I think.
I agree. And it is a journey. I do not recommend you go on alone. I think, look, we're harmed in relationship. We
Yeah.
come out of childhood wounded, most of us.
Yes.
And the degree to those wounds change person to person. They're different. And the depth of those wounds obviously are different. But I believe that the path to healing is in relationship. And whether you're doing it directly with your partner or with a close friend who drinks
Yep.
the Kool-Aid with you, and maybe your partner doesn't believe in therapy, doesn't believe in attachment work, but a friend does, and you can at least start drilling down on your side of the street following this. I really think that's advisable. I wouldn't want to do it alone.
I do think journaling through it can be helpful. Sometimes that can sort of externalize it, right? And then not to do a shameless plug, but I feel so passionate about this topic that I did it I don't have it out yet. It's still being edited, but I did this like 3-4 hour long course. And I do this exact thing, which is helping people start with the trigger. And then we go into fear and we go into sadness and we go into shame and we try to hit all those layers. And I do it very slowly. So the first exercise is just kind of touching it. The second exercise and naming it. The second exercise is doing some validating of it. The third exercise and then we just keep going into the deeper and deeper layers. So hoping to help people who don't have access to a therapist have some sort of some sort of activity that they can do to try to get to this stuff on their own.
What a great resource. Will you make sure to let me know when it is available?
Yeah, sure.
That's great.
Sure. Yeah.
Julie, you are chock full of information and
you.
your skills are so evident. Where can people learn more about you?
Well, I have a website, thesecurerelationship.com, and then my Instagram is at thesecurerelationship. And there are imposter accounts. You have to, make sure the blue check is there, basically.
There you go. Look for the verified check. Yeah.
Oh, Secure Love, my book, and then the podcast is Secure Love Podcast too. So, and I'm writing. I just got a new job. I'm writing Attachment Theory for Dummies.
Oh my gosh, we have needed that. Well, I asked you at least once in this conversation, can you dumb that down for me? So I definitely want a copy of that when that comes out.
Okay, for sure. I'll send you one. It's about 9 months out. So.
Okay, great. I mean, it's a baby. You're going to give birth.
Yes.
That's great.
I am going to give birth. Yeah.
I look forward to coming to the shower of that.
Yes. Great.
Julie, thanks so much for this conversation.
You're welcome. It's been great.
We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. Editing and sound engineering is by Bart Migal. Our theme music is by Trending Music. Special thanks to Amanda Christiani, Robin Gentian, and Inez Gut. If you haven't already subscribed, please follow the show. I want to keep We Need to Talk free and not behind a paywall. I also want to keep making these episodes for you. So do that for me, and I will keep showing up for you, just as I have been, to give you free quality content with facts that you can rely on. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode packed with the dating, relationship, and mental health hacks you, my friend, have come to expect. References are always linked in the show notes. I'll see you soon.